Hello, everyone. My name is Rodney Fong, President and CEO of the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce, and I welcome you to this Chamber webinar with our partner Accenture here. We are to mark the time almost 7 months into COVID-19 here in San Francisco, and it has been a challenging time, of course, for the entire world, challenging for the nation, challenging for the state, and challenging for San Francisco. Although San Francisco, as you know, is known for a city of innovation and creativity, and even with COVID-19 and some of our responses going forward, we've been able to manage to do that, just execute creativity and ingenuity. We're here to talk more about that and a little bit what's in the future for San Francisco. Accenture, our great partner, has laid out a roadmap, some 5 truths to how businesses, organizations, whether they're big businesses, small businesses, or nonprofits, begin to navigate and begin to look into the future of how they can adapt and adjust to be future ready. Want to introduce our panelists, or mention our panelists. Naomi Kelly, the city administrator for the city and county of San Francisco, has very graciously joined us. Thank you, Naomi. Daniel Ramsey, the head of industry and pure play and DTC retail of Google, is here to join us. And you'll have to stay tuned to find out what DTC stands for. First up is Stacy Blanchard. Stacy Blanchard is with Accenture. She's a managing director, and she's about to tell us about the 5 truths of the reality and future of businesses. Stacy leads the strategic consulting business side of the West, which is a significant part of Accenture's new growth model. And Stacy is focused on organizational strategy and transformation for the past 19 years. She's worked globally across a multitude of client situations, industries, and situations, integrating real world experience with a recognizing approach to coach the C-suite and help clients transform their agendas to unlock potential and organizations, people, and technology. So with that, Stacy, I'm going to let you maybe sort of set the table, and then Naomi and Daniel will be able to join for some deeper discussion.
Great, Rodney. Thank you so much. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. It is a true honor to be here, Rodney, with you and Naomi, Daniel, and the team. I appreciate everybody's efforts to get us to this point. And, while you might hear a thread of hope and resiliency and some positivity and at least a perspective from this end, I would just personally say to everybody out there, our colleagues that have brought this together, it is not lost on me. We're right in the middle of it. I'm right in the middle of it with all of you as a mom, as a working mom, as a leader in an organization that has also been impacted, and then also helping to try to get state, local businesses of all sizes to a good place. So I know the personal impact of everything from COVID-19, and I would even go further and just say as a people and a community, born and raised here in the Bay Area, and as a people and community, we're also going through, just an incredible, difficult time when it comes to racism, unrest, social injustice. And so, we've got, we have a pandemic going on, and we have a whole lot more going on as a people. And so, while you will hear hope and you'll hear resiliency and you will hear positivity, because I see it, and I think we all are coming together on this to say we see it. I just want to acknowledge the realities that we're all in the middle of still, with a journey ahead. So one of the things when we talk about, outmaneuvering uncertainty, which is maybe a mouthful, I would think of it this way: as I think we are in a time, and we'll talk a little bit about industry differences. We'll talk about, is it a U shape or a V shape or a K shape, or do we really know? And then we'll talk about these 5 new truths, which I think are pretty, I think they're pretty powerful. It's actually part of the discussion that brought Accenture and the San Francisco Chamber of Commerce together in this discussion initially. But I would think of it as, we're in these phases. We could think about it now, next, never normal. We could think about it as we were in a survive and evolve. But that outmaneuvering uncertainty, I think, is really important. We got very, out of survival. We came into this, big moment, and we're still in it around reopening. And I would just challenge everybody to think about, is it really reopening, or is it about the moment that says, we will never come to this time again, we hope, but we will never come to this time again in our lives potentially. And so is it about reinvention? So I would, just kind of put that backdrop around this. And I think we've got a role in this as just people, as individuals, as human beings, as leaders of people, and also, as employers to really think about a new beginning. So if we, Kim and team, if we can bring up the industry slide, the industry view, I think that would be maybe a good visual anchor for everyone. And I'll make a couple of comments, and then later in Q&A, if anybody's got questions, we can come back to those. I think when you look at industries, we've all experienced this time from a different seat. We don't always kind of take that step back and say, wow, there's been, truly greater impact, some negative, some positive, industry by industry. And I think the point for us as individuals and consumers, as businesses, as leaders of businesses, is to say, are we clear on both the impact and are we clear on the opportunity? If we look at an area like public sector, public sector is an area where, a lot of impact, and Naomi can certainly, has been dealing with this and leading this firsthand. But I think, there was a huge move, and still is a huge move, to drive societal level and citizen level safety, contact tracing, help businesses rebound, drive different needs in the supply chain. Similar to retail. Retail is impacted differently, and it's impacted actually here in the West, I see, versus some of the retailers that are in other locations. And we can talk about why that may be, but retailers going from doors, physical doors completely being shut, to having to rethink, what's a dark store, what's a digital store, what is touchless shopping, and consumerism really mean, and e-commerce really mean. And some, and you see, right, who really is thriving at this time, some have, were ready, and they were ready for things like this well in advance, or they were slowly getting there and they accelerated, or they found themselves quite behind and therefore further disrupted at the moment. So I think, every industry has got different implications, and then certainly a different way that they are each thinking about reinvention, not just reopening, but actual reinvention. The jobs, when we look at the actual jobs and you think of, the number of software and platform businesses, comms and high tech businesses that have announced, they're not coming back to the old anytime soon. And if anything, they've said, we are forever changed. And I think it's great to look at that from a leadership standpoint. We see 37% of jobs can plausibly be done at home. And the other piece of research we have is about 54% of those surveyed are saying, I intend to stay at home or virtually work in some way, shape, or form ongoing. So when you think about where we are as a people, where I may be personally as a mom and an employee, where what a business's stance is, depending on the type of business that they're in, these are all things that we've got to kind of take into our scenario planning and our thinking as we think about this moment in time, and how the pandemic may evolve over time, as well as how some of these other kind of social, civil level issues are unfolding at the same time. So as we look to the next slide, we're going to take a little bit of a look by industry again, but we're going to look at how are organizations thinking about recovery? What do they think or anticipate the shape of the recovery is going to be? And so, while 64% of those surveyed have started some form of, I'm going to say, reopening to reinvention, many industries, as you can see here, said, I really think it's going to be a U. The reality, we believe, is, you're probably looking at something that's some combination, but probably more of a K recovery. And we're not definitively claiming K, but what I will say about that is what we're seeing is a greater divide. And this whole kind of downturn and upturn in this kind of, natural U-shape. You know, one could argue when you look at the statistics in Europe and different pockets of resurgence, are we sure about that? And how do we plan accordingly? Whether it's a U, a K, a L shape recovery, how do we plan accordingly for that and think about scenario plans is one part. The other part is to say, as we are reopening and thinking about reinvention, every decision everyone is making out there is becoming a little bit less about compliance and policy. You know, the state has told me I have to, or the county has told me I have to more employers and more businesses making their own choices. And there's good in that, and there's challenge in that. And so we've got more reliance upon employers and businesses in the absence at times of state, local, and government. And so, you know, how those choices are going to play out have, you know, a direct hand in the shape of recovery for that particular, you know, organization in an industry. So just a couple of things that, you know, we thought might be helpful for everybody out there to say, am I thinking about industries? Am I thinking about the variability and the different impacts? And then am I thinking about what recovery might look like or what those scenarios may be so I can plan accordingly? And then I think Rodney will pick up on some of those threads as we go through the discussion. The last part I would just say here as we look at kind of these 5 new truths is this, and if we could go to that slide. So while we've got, you know, 74% of you know, organizations that we surveyed out there, they are planning to do some form and already are in the middle of some form of total reinvention of their operating model and their processes to be more agile. You've got about 92% that are accelerating some form of cloud and digital as a foundation of how to operate. And you've got about 87% that are taking action with their cash position and saying, how do I go after merger and acquisition, right? New IP, new talent pools that maybe I was thinking about, but I lagged on before. Not every business is in that position, obviously, but thinking strategically about your cash position is happening right now. Well, that's all great from a business standpoint. These 5 new truths, I'll highlight a couple of things and then Rodney turn it back to you. I think one is around this, the confidence piece and trust. So to think about putting our human beings, our people at the center, not just our consumers, but first and foremost, just human beings and people at the center of every single thing we do means there's a call for leadership right now because the confidence and the worry and the anxiety is real, right? And it's there. So how we are dealing with and not ignoring that reality of that new human truth is that confidence is low, leadership is needed. We've got about, when we looked at the trust in government, and I will not comment further than that, but I'll just say when we look at the trust in government, it was at about 64% when we last assessed about 45 days ago, and that was declining 6% from when we surveyed before. That again kind of speaks to is confidence in, right, government, the ability to kind of keep control and keep chaos to a minimum, increasing or decreasing, and there's question there. Bit of a shift in attitudes and choices. So how you, all of us are making personal choices is changing quite a bit. My attitude, my buying patterns, where I buy from, who I buy from, do I buy, all changing, and things that are part of this confidence equation. And then I would also say just, you know, the good in some of this is this balance that's coming to be a reality of it's about the individual, you know, as much, if not more, than the shareholder. And so, you know, bringing some parity to those two things is maybe a bit of that silver lining. When you look at the next one around virtual, kind of this notion that, you know, everything that can be virtual will be virtual, and how do you think about your organization, whatever size it may be, as being an intelligent organization, as having intelligent operations? The winners will be the ones here that actually test and explore. They will drive for speed. You see how people responded to school, in healthcare for PPE. You look at e-commerce and those that have really accelerated versus gone the other direction, or who really looked at a responsible supply chain and rethought the supply chain because borders were closed. 53%, as I said, right, plan to be virtual in some way, shape, or form. And so the way that people work will forever be changed. And so that puts a lot of onus on us as business leaders and businesses to really think about our workforce and our capacity, how we think about allocating our capacity. When we talk about, every business is a health business, it means we've all got a role. Before, if we thought of ourselves as an employer, and it's when the employee is at work, and that's when I care about safety and health and wellness. I'm not maybe always even thought about what happens when they walk through a door. Do they walk through a door? What's the true mental health of somebody working at home, especially if they're a single individual and maybe they haven't had any contact, or they've had loved ones that have been lost. The whole definition of being a healthcare company is no longer just about payers, providers, life sciences. We are all in this. And I think, it's a direct correlation to trust. The more that we're able to kind of show up in a way that is incredibly responsible right now. Cocooning is about, and the winners in cocooning will be, if you think about cocooning as, I now spend, how much more time not in retail, but at home in the kitchen, or I or my husband spend time at home in the kitchen. Lipstick sales have gone down while pan spray has gone through the roof. So we have to think about those out there that are winning. They are optimizing for the home. They are optimizing for the things, and they are getting premium for the things that we are driving to the home with personal experience, where it is safe and it's efficient with all the things they're having to likely juggle at home. So that's what cocooning is about, which I think is an interesting one to think about if you haven't thought about services and products that you may offer. And then I think the last one's probably the most up in the air right now, especially with an election this year, at least in the US, for those that are listening to this in the US and the local area, is the tension between government, individual, personal, and shareholders. There's a tension right now for who is going to really drive my choice at the end of the day. The reality is, it's really us as individuals that is kind of driving choice and probably shifting the governance here that's going on more broadly. So 5 things, Rodney and team, we've talked about this, and I'm happy to have been able to share it with a broader audience that I think I'm hoping will help kind of shape the way we think about, again, not just reopening, but reinvention.
Thank you, Stacy. That is beautifully summed up from a technical aspect, but obviously from a personal lens on it as well. We're all dealing with it together. Your comments about choices, I think that is fascinating going forward. We're all going to have to make different decisions, and whether they're buying decisions, whether they are employment decisions, whether they are, in the past, we thought nothing of going to 2 or 3 different events, Naomi, in the same night. Those decisions are going to set back a little bit, and like, do we really want to be exposed to that event, or we're going to chop that down to just 1 event rather than 3? And so in a good, positive way, I hope that more isn't necessarily better, and that we make true investments into our friends, our workplace, our colleagues, our partnerships, and that they become actually, frankly, more genuine than they were before. I want to get right into this discussion, and I'll stop by saying that we have done a number of these types of webinars and discussions. This one in particular intrigues me, because here we have the city administrator, Naomi Kelly, who's running one of the top metropolitan cities in the nation, and Daniel joining us from Google, who's on the cutting edge of retail and experiences online. Somewhere there's going to be a middle ground where we're all going to come together here. And this is why I think this particular group is a really unique one. I want to introduce formally Naomi Kelly, who's been a great friend for a long time. She is the first woman and first African-American to serve as city administrator for the city and county of San Francisco. She oversees the City General Service Agency, which consists of more than 25 city agencies and a budget nearly $750 million and over 2,700 city employees. Naomi is strongly committed to the strength of the local economy, supporting small business, city neighborhoods, and ensuring the efficacy of government services. Welcome, Naomi. Daniel Ramsey, Head of Industry, Pure Play, and DTC, which I still want to find out exactly what that is, retail at Google. Daniel works closely with retailers in this space to help them grow their businesses through Google. Prior to this role, Daniel worked in specialty retail vertical at Google, leading clients to capitalize on growth opportunities in e-commerce, omni-channel, digital marketing, and measurement. So welcome to you all. I want to pick back right up where Stacey sort of began to go about technology and the K-shaped curve potentially. Many of us know the V-shaped curve, the U, the W, the K, which was actually mentioned in last night's debate, is maybe one where some people are excelling and others are not. And I want to draw a correlation to technology, but specifically broadband and access to the internet, whether it's free, paid for, speed in different neighborhoods over another neighborhood, regional internet broadband access, and how do we as San Francisco and the San Francisco Bay Area clearly have to compete now where broadband is the new electricity. And for the Bay Area's perspective, we want to make sure the power is on. So Naomi, maybe, I know this is a difficult area, but maybe you can just talk about just a little bit of the background in getting there and what we need to do to get there.
Absolutely. So as you know, many of the telecom industry and the internet provider industry has really been pushing fiber to the premise, not just for small businesses, but for residents. And to do that, a lot, you can either do fiber overhead through the overhead wires that you often see on the west side of town or the Sunset, or you can do it underground, which is very disruptive and very costly. But we're still committed to it, or you can do it through antennas on roofs or what have you. Our Department of Technology has been really focusing on with internet, with the industry and trying to get it to our affordable housing and to our residents. But in thinking in it around businesses, getting fiber to the premise is one thing, but it's also having access to internet service and having it at a rate that is affordable. Because what we found is we can get the fiber to the premise, but then you have to, what's the next step in affording that internet coverage? That is just as high speed that everyone now needs, especially if we're working from home, especially if you are now relying more on technology so that you can operate your business. And I would just add one more thing, is not just the internet speed and the internet coverage, but it's also the tech industry needs to think through. And I just had this one example of, I know a hair salon that could not afford the subscription fee to the scheduling system that they were using to book prior to COVID-19. When all business, because they're just opening up now, they're now 6-7 months into it, they had no money to pay rent, their business rent, their home rent, all the other utility bills, you name it. Even though it was all being deferred, they still have balloon payments at the end. So that was one of the first things to go. The downside to that is that company decided to take all their clientele list. So the tech industry, in addition to the internet industry and the telecom industry, has a responsibility to come up with lifeline programs for our small businesses. So that's kind of my take on it.
Thank you, Naomi. I appreciate that. Daniel, I want to hear so much from you. About what you were working on, what your department, your division is working on, but back to the question about access to internet and without that, how do you guys succeed, or without that unilaterally, how do you succeed?
Yeah, I mean, of course, from Google's perspective, access to internet has been foundational to Google's growth, and then and enabling more and more of our partners to come online enables them to capitalize on Google services. So from that perspective, access to internet is core to what we believe in, and it's crucial. And obviously in certain areas of the country, Google's invested in fiber networks, and that is an area of focus for the organization. But From my perspective, thinking about, coming from a retail background, how retailers should be thinking about this is, everyone has essentially, a device in their pocket. And that gives not just retailers, but all businesses access to a huge audience. And so from that point of view, I think, access to the internet is foundational to that, whether that's broadband, whether that's 3G, 5G, however they access, that's absolutely crucial. So from my point of view, and certainly from Google's perspective, ensuring access is foundational to everything we've done.
Thank you. Let me try to shift gears for a little bit and just talk about the work from home. And Stacy touched on it, how some companies have committed that they're not going to come back till early 2021, mid 21, or maybe even late. This shift, the MTC, our regional transit group, had made a suggestion that they ask employees to, or employers to only request them to come in at 60% into the office. This would be a significant blow to the downtown areas of not just San Francisco, but any metropolitan city, any downtown, any even suburban area. And then how that connects to retail. So, right now we're in the shelter in place and we feel this extreme measure to go way over here, and we're probably going to go way over there. But somewhere we're going to land in the middle where we need to convene human to human for creativity, for conceptualizing things. And then we can go back home or to other home office to execute those things. Where will the balance be? And what does that mean to on the street, ground level retail experiences, restaurants where maybe Daniel, you and I would have had a lunch meeting to discuss and plan this webinar? Is that going to still exist, or are we going to be limited to just occasionally when it's forced to happen? I do think we are social animals, and at some point that animal will take over on us and we'll want to go out for drinks and cocktails. But if you guys can just open discussion, the three of us, four of us, talk about that and what we, if you can look in the crystal ball a little bit, what do you think that feels like?
Yeah, I can start if you'd like. I think for sure we're feeling our way through this at the moment. And the reason I say that is because, initially, from Google's point of view, initially we said, hey, we're going to be out of the office. Some core staff that absolutely need to be in the office are going to be out of the office until December. That was recently extended, and you may well have seen as well that there was a piece of research done amongst Google staff, and around 60% of the staff said actually they'd be comfortable in coming into the office less often. But that doesn't mean not coming into the office. It means coming in less office and having a slightly different environment, and which is a big fundamental shift for an organization like Google. If you think about the way that the offices were set up, they were set up around restaurants and micro kitchens, not because we all love food, but because that encourages interactions that are off the cuff, where ideas are shared over lunch or over coffee. And so from that perspective, I think there's definitely a need for us as employees to come together, without a doubt. Okay, we can do that online, but there's still a need for that human physical connection, without a doubt. And then along with that, I think, I and many people at Google work in a client-facing role. And when we work with clients and partners, again, that human interaction is hugely important. So coming back to my statement at the start, we are feeling our way through this. I see some kind of hybrid. And I think there are plenty of parallels that we can draw, particularly to other organizations. If I look at IBM, for example, my brother in the UK works for IBM. He's worked at home for about 10 years. He's been into an office. There is an office in the city near his location. He goes into the office now and again to interact with his team. He'll travel down to London to do the same. I think we're going to be probably operating in an environment more akin to that, where there is this fluidity between the, spending time in the office and spending time at home and spending time with clients. But I do think we won't see the world as it was previously, where everyone had to come in the office. And at least I'm saying that from the perspective of my experience at Google. But and like I say, we're still feeling our way through this, and there are nothing set in stone. But it feels like that shift is starting to happen for sure.
We've only been 6-7 months into this, but the notion that we were giving someone a performance review based on attendance and whether they were late 5 minutes to show up to work or not seems like a whole world away. And now
Yeah.
even managing people like, you know, hey, Rodney, do your job and here's your assignment. I'm going to be very specific about what's needed in 1 month. Go do it. If you want to work at midnight, go for it. But you know, in your best waking hours. But I think the notion of like sitting at your cubicle to make it look like you've been busy is gone now.
Yeah.
Stacey, I'm just curious from your perspective, and I know you deal a lot with healthcare related clients, maybe even telemedicine being a little bit of a pioneer in how this will all work out. We'll need to have you unmute though.
So sorry. So a couple of views from this end, and I thought, Daniel, your perspectives were also great. I mean, I think, you know, and I will talk, Rodney, about healthcare, but I also think there's intentionality that's going to happen here in the way that we gather going forward, which I think, Daniel, when you think about, you know, this some sort of that middle ground or this, you know, this right, you know, tone that we're going to strike with this. I think the intentionality of what's going to happen, and I'm already seeing happen when people want to come together in the office. Think about how many times are you in the office and you are maybe on the phone with or doing things in a cubicle somewhere, not even interacting with, you know, the team or even using the great spaces that we've all created. And I know, you know, I hate to say it, but, you know, guilty as charged. So I think the intentionality of how we're going to use space for innovation and teaming actually is going to be far better than what we've seen in the times of old. I think that's a positive that's going to come from this. If I think about, you know, small businesses, unfortunately, have been really disrupted, you know, depending on what their cash position was and you know, what their health situation was with their family, et cetera. I mean, so we've got just, you know, we've got a divide in the way that small businesses have been impacted versus, let's say, healthcare. We think because we're in a pandemic, I think many think because we're in a pandemic, well, healthcare must be, you know, just booming, and they are booming, but they've also had some significant hits to cash and cash flow. Nobody's going in for elective surgeries. Now they're starting to come back now, but if you really think about what was going on there from a health standpoint, we had incredible frontline workers doing work that, you know, I mean, you know, just incredible, right? Risk and work. They didn't have the choice to stay home. They don't have the choice today to stay home in order to bring a check home and put food on the table. I've got, you know, a nurse. My niece is a nurse. My clients are in healthcare. This has been incredibly stressful and incredibly taxing. So I think there's going to be, you know, we just have disparity in a very diverse reality of impact, right, based on the business. And then I think your point of telemedicine. So, you know, just working in healthcare, and those that I've worked with, that if they're on or they listen to this, I always say, you know, from a maturity standpoint in industry, healthcare tends to be a little bit behind. We are just not always as innovative as we could be. There's some that are, but not all. What I think about this time, though, is they've been able to just rise to the occasion and show what they're capable of. They've almost made a case for why, you know, you do, in some respects, need bricks and mortar. They're not going to go away tomorrow when it comes to hospitals. And at the same time, to that point of cocooning, you know, my dad went through some, you know, hellacious healthcare issues pre-pandemic, but we wanted all of that to be home when there was no pandemic. If I were going through that today, I would want that all to be at home. So when you think about telemedicine, safety, caring for the human being, I mean, it's a huge opportunity. And I think we've accelerated, but we're not quite where we could be.
Naomi, yeah.
I would just add that, you know, you're actually right. The frontline workers were always out there. Of our 35,000 workforce, 20,000 were at work the next day when the shelter in place was put in order. There are law enforcement, bus drivers, operational crews that keep the streets running. But the other 15,000 that could telework, I think you all hit the salient points. Like, we're realizing there are certain things we need to be in person for and certain things not. And we're thinking through what can actually, it's a new world now, right? The COVID-19 has changed the way we think about delivering government services. Our call centers like 311, do they need to be in person at a call center? Maybe not. Like, and we've shown that they can all deliver effective 311 services from home. But then other areas will actually come back to work. I would also add back to, like, and I know you're talking about is marketing, because it's not just office. If we know that office is not going to be what it used to be pre-COVID-19, because we realize that some of this work can be done from home, then how do we market our downtown area, right? I got to wait for the conventions to come back, because a lot of the downtown businesses was based off of not just office, lunch hour, and happy hour, but it was really based off of our convention business coming to town, and that has really hurt the downtown area. And that's going to be in the last category of reopening, because that's large mass gatherings. But also from a regional approach, right? I've been doing like a time walking around the city, and we get in groups walking, of course, socially distanced and face mask on, but then afterwards we stop and eat. And our shared space programs have been really helpful, because then we stop and we walk and explore different parts of the city. So encouraging people just to walk the city, come and do outdoor dining, come enjoy the museums are starting to open. This regional approach of bringing folks in so that we can help our downtown economy. So that's kind of my thoughts.
I love it. I'm going to be the optimistic Chamber of Commerce guy and say that, San Francisco in recent years, the nightlife, it really dropped off. And our arts and culture and theater life, and even gastronomy in San Francisco, which we were top of the game for a number of years, had fallen off. And we recently have been doing a lot of work with economic development and long range. And you need talent and you need place, is what I'm understanding. And the talent came from, I think, our proximity to Stanford University and UC Berkeley. And that's talent pool landed here in San Francisco. The other sort of unknown, unmeasurable part is the place, the theater, the live music, the ambiance, the beauty, the hikes, the connection to Ocean Beach, the connection to parks and national parks just within 2 hours away. I would love to see San Francisco, well, maybe we don't crush it in the lunch hour because of what Daniel talked about. We're working largely from home during the day, but in the evening, that's when we're going to go out and hang out with friends. That's where we're gonna meet up with colleagues. It's not just for a 45 minutes where my iPhone's going to buzz me when I have my next appointment, but a truly enriched, engaged experience with a partner, whomever that might be, work or personal. So San Francisco, and I think because of our weather, we essentially have the ability to be outdoors or indoors year round. This wouldn't happen in Chicago, I don't think. So maybe there's a shift, sort of a pattern shift of the usage of the city, where we saw that rush in at 7 o'clock downtown, rush back out, that maybe we see a little bit of a stretch into the evening. So maybe I'm getting hungry. That's why I'm thinking about food already. But I'm just kind of curious if maybe that's where we're going. I think some of the Asian cities have maybe already start to see this, where you're, at least in Japan, where your house is so small, your apartment's so small, your entertaining happens outdoors, in restaurants, in karaoke bars. And there's a possibility that San Francisco has that ability. I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on that, if that's maybe a possibility.
Oh my gosh, I'm just going to jump right in. I absolutely think it's a possibility. One of the reasons we issued grants for the arts operating grants this year, when there's not going to be live performances, is that, one, these businesses have annual operating expenses. We want to make sure they have PPEs. We want to make sure that they can move their performances online. And when the economy reopens, we want them ready to go, because we know that our arts industry is a true attraction to San Francisco and a regional attraction. So we want to hit the ground running to bring people in to that. And we've not only given operating grants, we've given loans and COVID-19 loans. What I'd say is that I think we need to partner up the city, because we've put our money where our mouth is to get these organizations, and not just arts organizations, but given out 17 million in small business grants. We'd like to partner with our financial institutions, because we're putting our money where our mouth is. We want to see our banks and financial institutions also give out low interest loans or forgivable loans to, and I don't know if I could say mom and pops on Main Street, to make sure that they thrive and they're here, because they are our fabric of San Francisco. This is why people come to the city and spend money here. And I buy from big chain retail. out of the convenience of it, but I love walking the neighborhoods to find these small business shops, to find these one-offs. And so, and not just our financial institutions, but philanthropy, our donor advised funds. Where can we put money in to our small businesses, our arts organizations, to just bring the business back? And we need to do that. We need to show leadership through government, and we're doing that, and partner with like the chamber and all of you to bring these financial institutions and these foundations to the table.
Stacey or Daniel, any thought on that?
You know, Naomi, I would so I would just echo that hugely. I think there is something going on about kind of re-engaging with, or even, you know, re-seeing, refinding new parts of our cities that we live in. And so while I'm in the Bay Area and I'm not right in San Francisco, but born and raised here. In fact, the other night, a group of us said, we just need to get to the city. I mean, we just had the, you know, the drive and the hunger to just be in the city, you know, like before, because it is a pull. But I do think that just refinding and reconnecting with our cities, it's nothing like turning around, you know, a corner of a street that used to be packed with cars and busy, that's now got, you know, umbrellas up and seats and chairs, all done safely and responsibly, where people are able to gather socially safely. You know, I think I just, to your point, Rodney, I think it's bringing a different dimension to things, for sure.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that we all need to start working as public and private sector projects to start cocooning our city, taking care of our city, getting new furniture, getting things reupholstered, and taking care of home. So important. Retail, Daniel, can you, I still a little bit mystified about your role, how you create retail experiences that are maybe educational at the same time, how they become learning tools, experience tools, but also an opportunity to purchase things that you need. Mute, sorry.
Thank you. And just to clarify the term D2C, I think you'd raised it in the intro. Essentially, you know, the retail vertical, the retail sector is broken up into a number of different business models. Direct to consumer, D2C, is essentially a retailer, any retailer that's built their own channel to their consumer. They don't have stores. They're basically mainly selling online. Think Stitch Fix, or think Fabletics. Any one of those brands that are building a relationship directly with their consumer rather than selling their brands or product through a third-party store. That's differentiated to specialty retail, which is typically orientated around a specialty like beauty or fashion, and typically have stores as well. And then there's big box as well. Think your Targets and your Best Buys. And so, you know, I, like I say in my bio, have worked in specialty retail and now focusing on the direct-to-consumer part of the retail world. And so my role essentially is about working with retailers in that community and helping them connect to their customers. That's either using Google's technology, Google's media, or even finding advanced use cases around, you know, combining data to be able to gain insights on customers that they wouldn't have previously had. And so some of the ways that we're helping create retail experiences, you know, particularly on the path to connecting with your customers, is you'll see, number one, you know, we have a large shopping program on google.com where you can go and find products from any retailer that wishes to share them on Google. And those retailers can either direct their customer online or to their store. So actually we have you know, an advertising product which enables retailers to push people to their store. We also have Google Shopping, which is where there are actually just free listings and paid for listings, where people can buy on Google with the confidence of transacting with Google and the payment being processed by Google, which is a slightly different path. And so we're creating, experiences essentially that enable to connect customers with businesses or retailers, no matter where they are, and no matter how they want to buy. And that's one of the biggest things that we've been focusing on, and particularly before COVID hit, which is this idea of omni-channel retail, which is essentially enabling you as a customer of a retailer to buy online, in store, or check it out online, reserve it, go into store and pick it up. And actually, I think that's one of the biggest experiences that we're going to see change, is this capability for you to buy online but go into the store. We've seen searches for what we call BOPIS, buy online, pick up in store. We've seen them surge with customers seeking retailers that will enable this. And I think this is one crucial aspect of the shift that we've seen since COVID that is a real trend, and a tailwind that is useful to capitalize on, because there is a reason to go into a store. It's either to touch their product, or it's because it's more convenient to drive around to the store and pick it up than it is to wait for it to be delivered. Or you might just be popping into town anyway. And actually, this is a way to bring people back into the city center. If you enable things like buy online, pick up in store, and then curbside pickup, where we're also seeing a huge amount of growth in demand. And so, what you asked the question about how we're building out those experiences, we're creating the capability for users to come onto google.com, identify products from retailers that they know, or from identifying new retailers, and then picking up and buying the products as they wish and as they need to. And so I think we're about to head into a really crucial period. We're just about to go into the holiday season, which is the biggest part of the calendar for retailers. One thing that we've seen as COVID hit was we did a survey with Ipsos, and we saw that actually 50% of consumers said they'd bought from a retailer they'd never bought from before at post-COVID. The reason being is because of that convenience aspect. They weren't necessarily able to go down to the local store to be able to buy the product they were after. So they'd go online and they'd find the product from somewhere else. And so actually, we're seeing this fluidity in the market, and we're seeing roughly, 40% of those people carrying on to buy from those new retailers. This presents a big opportunity, I think, as we head into the holiday season. Plus, and then the other big opportunity is, we're seeing consumers looking for products really early on now, because one of the biggest concerns that they have is around deliveries arriving on time. So actually, most people are saying that they're going to start their Christmas shopping even before Halloween, mainly because they're worried about things being delivered because so many people are buying online. Again, I think this is a big opportunity for physical retailers, because the advantage of having a physical presence is that there's a local aspect to it. There's a convenience aspect to it. So if you can enable your customers to buy online and come into you to pick it up, you'll be able to capitalize on that opportunity. And as I say, early on in the holiday period. So that answers your question about how we're creating experiences and some of the shifts that we're seeing in the retail kind of consumer journey, if you like. And just to finish off, roughly before COVID, we had about 11% of retail sales in the US taking place online. That increased 30% from Q1 to Q2, and it's roughly now, it had a spike, and it's roughly now bottomed out at about 17%, 18%. That's actually a huge shift when you look at that from a monetary perspective. So we're seeing this trend continue. We're seeing people more comfortable in buying online, and I think it's now a big opportunity for retailers to create that ease of purchase, and as part of that, draw people into the stores with convenience.
Fascinating, Daniel, and I think you're right. This holiday season will be a real test to see what the patterns are. This triggers all kinds of other thoughts in that if you purchase something online, order it, and go pick it up in San Francisco, this triggers like a whole exclusivity about that San Francisco location wants to be the only place in the Bay Area where you can do it, to drive more trips into San Francisco. So I think it creates some other assets and commodities that we hadn't really thought about before. I'm going to jump to Q&A, and there's a couple of questions, actually two that are sort of blended together. And I think, Naomi, they're best suited for you. The questions are there, and I'm going to paraphrase, are there some things that have happened because of COVID, like the shared streets or the parklets, that you think may become permanent? And the other question, which is a little bit relative, is to the public service and government. Are there things maybe like the Board of Supervisors meeting that is 100% online, that's actually worked out to be quite effective, I think, going to stay? And what's the permanency of these things that have been either piloted or just out of survival tried?
That's a very good question, or questions. Yeah, the shared street program is definitely a winner. You know, we have rolled that out and we have piloted it. And so the question is, once we have more traffic coming into the city, what's the balance? And so that I see that program staying. But there's also sharing of streets and shutting down streets, which, you know, you have to balance out the ability to move throughout the city and the ability for, you know, bicycling and walking and exercise, which is truly needed from a healthcare, for our health in this shelter in place standpoint. So that we are definitely learning as we go forward, and it's all still pilots because the world is changing and it's changing before us. And we just don't know what the patterns of behavior will be. And so we have to wait for that to kind of make to inform our decisions. As for government services, it is truly some opportunities all of our public hearings, our public bodies have gone online. The Board of Supervisors being one, all of our commission hearings have gone online. It has been both positive and some negatives to it. The positive is that we were able to carry out government services and operations remotely. We were able to make important decisions. It was done in a transparent way. It has allowed more people to participate that couldn't participate because they were working during the day and couldn't come down to the Board of Supervisors. So we're getting a more diverse public input, which is truly a positive. The downside is that it takes us longer because we're learning the technology, going through technology glitches. And so the staffing it can go from anywhere to 30% longer meetings to 300% longer meetings, depending on the topics that are going on hand. The bad news with public comment is that with technology, people have really gotten these robo-like messages in where you'll listen to 5 hours of the same message where it's not really adding value to government. Like that one message could have come over, but yet they've flooded the public comment lines where we've had, you know, particularly at the Board of Supervisors and the Police Commission, where folks are putting in 12, 14-hour days, and that's not humanly sustainable because we're not staffed to have shifts to, like, after that 8 hours, the next shift comes on and takes over. We're just not staffed to that. And with the exception of the Board of Supervisors, our commissioners are volunteers. So if they're going to 2 or 3 in the morning, and have to be up at work at 8, that's not fair, and you're not going to encourage participation in the civic process. So we're still working out. By and far, I think that we rule on it is a much, it is a winner and is a success. The other bigger thing is we're looking and actively going through right now, and it'll probably take me a year, but this I think will be long-term, looking at what services can we move online in an equitable way. You know, we've gone through and looked at, here are only 60 departments, but we have over 300 websites out there. Like, what services can be done online? What services have to be in person? What services can you download a PDF file? Which one's a fillable PDF file? Which one can you make an appointment? And we're going through this service inventory right now with all the departments. Here's what you say is online. Is this true? Has it changed since COVID-19? Can we update this? So we're going through an active exercise right now to try and bring more of our services online, but understanding, back to the K economy, that not everyone has access to the internet and that we still need to provide in-person services. Or how do we make those digital services, back to our very first question, available to those who don't have access to it so that they can participate in this digital economy?
Well, I think the three of you are doing phenomenal jobs. This is a scary time, but this is also a time where we are inventing and we are on the cutting edge of so many different things that are coming together. So I congratulate all three of you and appreciate all the work, and thank you for all the work that you are doing individually and within your work groups. It seems like so much of this conversation is about time. and whether that we make decisions to where we share our time, how we share our time, where we save time by being able to go online to give public comment. And so related to time, I've got some bad news. We're coming up on the hour, and that was one of the fastest hours of my webinar life here. But I wanted to see if there's any closing comments or thoughts that maybe the three of you have from this discussion, or anything you want to sort of leave us with, a little tidbit or nugget.
Rodney and team, I mean, I just think Naomi and Daniel's, you know, some of the comments you made there towards the end, I think, you know, when we think about industry and the blurred lines we need to create at a time like this, that we have an opportunity to create at a time like this, is pretty powerful. And so when you think about banks coming together with platform companies, and you know, we've been bringing people together around, you know, small business loans to, you know, minority segments of the population, that is, you know, banding together to really think about this time and what, you know, from a responsibility standpoint, what are those opportunities? So I would, you know, I would leave with the thought that that's how we all need to be thinking, is how do we converge cross industries from, you know, the seat that we have to make a responsible difference. I think there's a great opportunity in that.
I can agree more, just bringing us all together. And thank you, Rodney, for doing that, bringing the chamber with government, with Accenture, with Google, because together our collective voices will help what I would say Main Street, and us partnering together and together as giving that hope, that confidence that we will be resilient and we will survive this, even if we have to reinvent ourselves, which we are.
Yeah, and I would just leave one final comment, which is, you know, there's so much doom and gloom, and actually I think when you pass out the doom and gloom, there's actually some real pockets of opportunity. Were there any big change like I just described in the retail sector? Actually, I think it throws at big opportunities, and the trick is how to capitalize on that opportunity, and at least, given some of the difficulties we have to get through this tough period, to hold on for as long as you can, you know, through this tough time, work with partners like us and everyone else on the call to help you through this tough time, and then get yourself into a better position as we start to see more openings. But like I described, some of those behaviors we're seeing driven by COVID are likely to remain. And so I think we need to think about what the opportunities are within those behaviors.
Thank you. I want to just get excited. Thank you very much to the three of you for participating in this. It's been a great discussion. This, as I mentioned, is only part one of a three-part series with our partner Accenture. So if you like this one, make sure you sign up for the next one. The Chamber of Commerce, 170 years. We picked the year to be 170, or COVID picked us for our 170th birthday. We are a nonprofit organization, much like KQED, and so we rely on sponsorship, we rely on membership, we rely on interaction from members like you guys here on this call and those that are listening. So I appreciate that. Want to point out that we have some other events coming up this Friday. Our WELL Conference, Women, Empowerment, Leadership, and Learning. It is a great panel. Tara Fennell from the mayor's office, but also who is involved in the Black Lives Matter mural sorry, I'm blanked on the district, the Western Edition. Jennifer Calaquinto from the Golden State Warriors is going to join us, and one that I'm particularly excited about, Dominique Crenn, the three-star Michelin star chef, is going to be our keynote speaker. So that's going to be a great event, and make sure you sign up for that one. We also have an Ebby's event coming up on November 4th, and if you sign up, you might even get a dinner sent to you via McCall's Catering to your house in preparation for that dinner. So thank you very much. Thank you all those for attending, and look forward to discussion. I think we just scratched the surface here, but it's the right time to think big, so you can work that into that direction, I believe. So thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.